What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Master Crafted. Today, we are going to be doing our fourth episode of our team's preparation, and we are talking about attackers. Phil, what do we need to know about attackers today?
Well, for those that may be going to their first team tournament or getting prepared or going to their 20th team tournament, bear with us as we just explain the difference and why it's important. So attackers are the two individuals that get selected to be put out into the one defender that the opposite team gets put out. So the team puts out one defender and you put out two attackers, which means your opponent, the people that put out the defender, get to choose between those two. There's a benefit both ways, right? When we put out our attackers, it means that we think these are the two best matchups for that one defender. Best matchup doesn't necessarily always mean pushing differential. Maybe it means that's the army that we think can blunt that other army is and keep the score relatively close. Or we think it's an army that can push differentials. Or we think they're two good armies, like into this one. So your attackers are different in terms of how you play them and then what you're looking to do with them, right? Because they are either blunting attackers or maybe they're trying to push differential. Whatever the case is, each one's going to be a little bit different, but we are focusing specifically on attackers that push differentials because at the end of the day, that's what we need to win games of teams for 40K.
Yeah, definitely trying to find those right little matchups out of your matrix so you can go, you know what, if they put this out as a defender, these are the two armies. If they pick, hopefully, if you have two options to throw at something that can both eat that defender, that's amazing. That's definitely not something the other team probably should have done if they put something out as a defender that can get eaten by two of your opponent's lists. So it's always good to have a good idea of what's out there on the other team to avoid these specific armies coming and eating your lunch for free. And to really just categorize these, we decided to throw it back a little bit. Our tier list today is very themed. We got the old salt and pepper, the push it as our ranking system, the full on push it as our top tier, and then just the push it real good as our A tier, and then some other salt and pepper shakeups. We'll be rounding out our B tier, and then the last couple we didn't go too wild with those names, but the last one is build dependent. These can potentially get some more differentials into certain armies, but it's likely as attackers, they aren't going to be something you're relying on consistently to go out there and get big scores a lot of the time. They're probably more defender-y take all comer list. And then last but not least, why am I even here? We'll cover this army. Why is this one army down here, Phil? We'll start at the bottom real quick.
Because there's better ones. There's better. So if we look at our matrix, I've talked about it before, right? We want armies that have a good amount of good matchups. Unfortunately, Imperial Agents doesn't have the rules, support, or a wide width of matchups to make them a good attacker. This doesn't mean they can't attack. And if I was to run them, that was the only thing that they would do because we have to find very, very, very specific matchups for them to go into, depending on the list we take and what we're looking to do. But there at the bottom, just because their window, you'll feel it. If you're doing pairings for the first times, you'll get them set up and you're like, man, Imperial Agents I don't want them to go into anything. Like I am almost hamstringing myself because I have this army that I have to find a matchup into. So yeah, unfortunately, they need more support. They need more help. But that is one army out of all of these that we're saying is just not doable, which is an insane statistic for 40K. So like I'll take one not performing adequate army when all the rest of them have a place in competitive teams.
Yeah, definitely not a bad place to be in. Even those lower armies in the build dependent, you definitely still can and should use them at attackers depending on the situations. Needing a blunter, this tier list is mostly based around the principle of what common lists are we seeing in the meta that can push high differentials into multiple matchups and really have a chance to get some high scores. And I think, Phil, is there a theme, it looks like, for the most part, across that top tier? I'm seeing a lot of similarities in between some of those factions.
Well, unfortunately, they're all stupid Space Marines. All but two of them are two stupid Space Marines. So overall, Like, not to say that none of like these detachments, these armies are all good, but they are, I will say, as a trend, like power armor bodies are good. These detachments are really good. World Leaders are good. Emperor's Children are good. Thousand Sons, I think, in terms of pushing differential, are very, very solid. Emperor's Children are definitely up there. And just Gladius Space Marines, they are insane. Insane.
Yes. Yeah. All four Chaos Marine factions are up there. It's almost like they're very good at specializing in certain things. And if you can get matchups where those specializations really come out and shine, you can just shit on people. Who
Yeah.
would have thought?
Yeah.
And the same goes for the 2L factions, who have just glass cannon bodies. If you can avoid some of those really bad matchups and go into the right things, holy cow, can their damage with just, T3 bodies really just take over a game and shine. And then Eldar also is just still gross.
Yeah. We can, if you were like looking at like tournament wins and stuff like that, that's not to say that like we can say that these are all good armies, right? Playing like an RE is a good army. Who would have thought they can push differentials? WTC layouts are a little different, but they do even better in WTC layouts, right? With the amount of landside blocking terrain and things that they can move through, and they have a lot of infantry and MSU. Same thing with World Eaters, same thing with Emperor's Children. Like, they are very, very mobile armies that are very good at denying primary. And that's what I would say all of these armies, top armies, do well, is deny primary. Because if we talk about pushing differential, it's not about just max scoring for ourselves. We need to do that. We need to be in the 80s to 90s. But we also need to deny primary. If you're gonna if you're gonna 20-0 someone, you need to beat them by like 50, right? And that's a lot of points. And to do that, you have to find ways to deny primary, deny secondaries, and you have to find ways to max score for yourself. So what do all these armies do? Yunari, end of the phase movement where they can just get out onto objectives. Warp spiders can kill screens, can kill things on objectives, can flip primaries. Jakari can do the same thing. T-Sun's incredibly mobile, access to mortal wounds. Mortarion is still a G. Death Guard, I have played them now 6 times, a few different detachments, and I have pushed some mighty high differentials. So I am basing this on a little bit of my experience with Death Guard, and I know, Lane, you've played into them as well. But they are very, very good, and even worse into some like really bad matchups, right? Like combat-focused matchups that maybe really rely on a 2-up save, and now they're always on a 3-up save. That really sucks. World Eaters, for me, are one of the most interesting armies in terms of new codexes that has come out. I love that Demonkin detachment, and I think we're going to see a lot of it once people start to crack it. And then Gladius Space Marines would be the only thing I run, but Marnius Kelgar, Double Oath, the obnoxious amount of CP, multiple Vectoras, can be oppressive to play into. It is very good. But all of these armies at the top level are there for a reason, because they deny primary well.
Yes. Yeah, they are going to come fight in the mid board, and they will do it probably better than you will. And that is a problem in most matchups. All right, moving it on down. We got a little bit more variety in the push it real good tier. First up, Orcs. A couple of different build paths we've been seeing, but Warhorde is probably the most likely we're going to see. Same thing. They are going to play around that primary very, very well. They're going to have their Wa turn. They're going to be terrible to try to knock out. And I know personally, Ryan has played Warhorde for us at the last team's event, and he was our go-to guy of just go run out there, pop your Wa, and just see if they can deal with it. And generally, people could not. He brought in a lot of points for us with that army. Orcs are solid right now.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. This doesn't make them bad. Just because they're in the next tier down, it doesn't make them bad. I would say the width of their matchups is shrinking slightly, very, very slightly. Warhorde is still exceptional. It's a good army. I'd be very happy if this was part of our 8 on a team, especially piloted someone as good as Ryan. Like, we so happy with that. But it gets narrower and narrower, right? So next up, Shadow Legion Demons. This could be, I think Plague Legion is up there too. I don't necessarily, maybe Index Demons you could throw in the mix to be up there, but Shadow Legion is very good. It's got the mobility, it's got the tricks to score, it's got good ways to deny primary, it's got a great toolkit unit, whatever you put it on, a Bloodthirster, Juggernauts or ACDC squad. I'm just going up, deleting something, and then disappearing. It's pretty impressive if you don't have plans to actually go into it. Yeah, Chaos Demons, no surprises here. They score really well on their own, and they have a lot of big demons that if you don't deal with, like, it just runs you over.
Yeah, you let a bloodthirster pick himself up 2 or 3 times, and it's hard to recover if he's knocking out important pieces time and time again. Up next, Deathwatch. You have been flirting a little bit with the Deathwatch yourself. Again, just a powerful Space Marine army. Good rules on being able to add the lethal sustained precision to your shooting. Very versatile, and into the right matchups, very strong.
Yeah, I mean, the only matchup I don't want to see with Deathwatch, if I'm honest, is probably Inari, just because they can turn off my Overwatch over and over again. Because, like, my big bricks, which is something that you rely on in Deathwatch, really need to have the threat of Overwatch, and if you take that away from me, that kind of sucks. But they are big bodies, T6 bodies, 3 wounds. They're really, really scary. And Deathwatch as a whole, once again, scores well because it's got the mobility. A couple rhinos, being able to get picked up and put back down. All those things make a huge difference for us.
Yeah. And then up next, who would have thought 2 tank skews? If you can find yourself in a matchup where they don't have a proper amount of anti-tank or high OC, you are going to beat them on primary, just like those top tier armies. But these are a little bit more susceptible, as Phil was saying, to that narrowing of just how many good matchups they really have.
Yep. So we have seen Imperial Knights dominate the meta right now. They're getting GT wins, or GT wins. They're doing well. That doesn't mean that they're not a bad army, or they're not always a bad matchup, because there are some matchups where you don't want to put Imperial Knights in. Like, if I'm honest, new Death Guard, especially with Mephitic Blade Haulers and all the lethals, I wouldn't want to put Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights into it unless it's a very, very, very specific Death Guard list that I was going into, because otherwise it's not fun. As someone who has played it multiple times from the Death Guard side. But there are other matchups where, like, I think maybe World Leaders would be perfectly fine for Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights. Like, I rate them into both of those attacking lists even better, because all the flat damage 3, all the good shooting, anti-fly, things that we really, really like to see. And Chaos Knights as well. They can go through walls, so both of those things make a difference. But the one thing that I think separates these armies out is those armigers and dogs are 8 OC. So when they get on there on the objectives, they can flip objectives really well. They can turn off certain things, and as you said already, skew, right? This is a vehicle skew. There are people taking, if we talked about the Home Nations Cup before, it was literally every team, I think besides one, had 13 dog span, 13 war dogs, and with like a shift here or a shift there, but 13 dogs, because it is so good. It's good into Yanari, which is a huge matchup that you have to deal with right now. It can be good into Space Marines, especially all that flat damage 3 and Melta, and like especially Ironstorm. It just goes up there and picks those things up because you don't have enough screens to deal with all of that stuff, and it can move through those screens for chaos. So yeah, overall, if you could find a way to convince someone to play Chaos Knights or Imperial Knights, you should do it, because that skew can be really beneficial.
Yeah. Or you could even run both, Phil. What's your opinion on running, Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights?
It can cause some people some problems. If you run both Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, what Lane is alluding to is our team has a Chaos Knight specialist and an Imperial Knight specialist. That is what they do, and they are both very good at both of those things. So imagine like that bad matchup that you're trying to avoid because it doesn't have enough anti-tank, just puts forward 2 Knight skews, and they have to pick one of them. That can be pretty tough.
Yep. But it can definitely mess with your allies if you have both of those lists. And if you aren't, if you're trying to sneak in a Calidus or Sisters for the Knights, or any demons with the Chaos version, then those extra pieces can definitely be up for grabs and cause some problems. The new Chaos Marine detached books now that are released make it a lot easier, though, to avoid that, which is very, very nice. While we're on Chaos Space Marines coming in up next. Creations of Bile. It is a stat check. It is fast. It can do the thing very well. Plays primary. It's going to fight you in the midboard. Just a few less good matchups, I think, still than those other specific chaos based Marines.
Yeah, there's some things that it probably will struggle into, right? If we talk about like Death Guard, Custodes, even like the reactionary stuff from Minari, I don't know if I necessarily would want to face. Fight's first bricks are just devastating, especially like that Incubi brick can be pretty scary for CSM Bile. But the reason they are up here, and I think Renegade Raiders is up here as well in terms of detachments that are very good, is because they can deny primary well. As you already said, they play in the mid board, they can deny primary, they can score well, they have good mobility, and they can do those things over and over again. So by no means is it a bad attacking list. I think it was very, very good. It can really mess with some people.
And then last but not least, your previous faction that you were running to teams, good old GSC. Are you thinking final day would still be the way to go for anybody looking to play GSC for teams, or is host just too good of a skew? That many bodies in a team's environment, just too strong to pass up.
If you have the insane desire to run that many neophytes, then Host of Ascension is for you. If that's what you want to do, have fun, go do it. Don't let my pessimism around that like detract you from wanting to run Host of Ascension, because it is probably the better detachment. I love Final Day, and there is still a world where I run it for this teams tournament, but I think it definitely matters for us in terms of like overall team composition. The reason Gene Stealer Cult is good, whether it's Final Day or Host of Ascension, is because those big bricks of bodies, they actually have less bad matchups, because sometimes they don't even kill things, right? They just get on, they 6-inch deep strike away, or they 9-inch deep strike away, and they make their charge, like they charge in, they just throw bodies at you. They say, I'm going to auto-see you on this objective. Doesn't matter if it's Chaos Knights with 2 dogs on there. I'm going to put a 20-man neophyte brick onto the objective, and then just be like, okay, well, I auto-see you. I'm not going to kill you. Like, I want to put as many shots into you as I can, but I'm not going to kill you. I am going to auto-see you, and then I'm going to come back and do it again.
Yeah, who would have thought recursion on an army like that has very strong primary play? Yeah. Up next, dropping it down into that B tier, the Salt and Pepper Shakeups, Custodes. They are very, very strong when it comes to singles, and they definitely still can blow a lot of matchups up and just do very well. But again, we're just kind of narrowing it down on how many of those armies out there they can blow out of the water and really push high differential.
Yeah. They are good. They are quite good. As Lane has said, that window is getting tighter and tighter. And I do think with the new codexes coming out, it keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter, because I'm like, I don't know if I want that matchup. I did play the World Leaders one. I'm still okay with that. But like Death Guard, not a fan.
No.
Not a fan. Nope. Inari, I don't want to see that. Chaos Demons is interesting. Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights are okay, but there's a lot of matchups in here that you want to avoid. So that just means, so if we're thinking tactically, right, for some of these, it just means I'm an attacker later, or I'm specifically targeting certain matchups, right? So if my opponent were to put out like World Eaters as the first defender, like, put Custodes out there, and then put Death Guard out there and be like, okay, World Eaters, which one do you want? Do you want Death Guard or do you want Custodes? And then they pick whatever they want, but I or the Death Guard player would put out a significant differential into World Leaders. Yeah, but it doesn't make it bad. It doesn't mean it's a bad attacker. It's where I would prefer it, honestly. And then we can go forward from there.
Yeah, definitely still can pop off with a Custodes. Just a few more things you do not want to run into. And the same is to be said for Grey Knights. They are very up-down dependent. You can be running the new Grotmist detachment, I guess, and rely on that a little bit less. But in general, still, it's not quite as primary bullying as the Custodes to really just run away with it. Your more secondary scoring is really one of their strong suits, as well as being decent at the primary game.
Yeah, for sure. And they probably do it a little better, honestly, than Custodes do. Like the primary denial game. Not to say that Wardens aren't great. Like a squad of Wardens on an objective and they pop the Feel No Pain, there's not many things that can actually shoot through and kill them. And if they try to and they put significant assets, then you just fight on that. But Grey Knights could be one of those skew armies for you. You could write in a bunch of NDKs and then, or a bunch of Terminator bricks or whatever the case is, and that could be your skewed list. Like when we talk about skews, it's not just hull spam. Maybe it's T6 body spam, or it's infantry spam. Those are all skews that we can do. Grey Knights could be a skew that you could go after, but they don't have to be. You could just run a good Grey Knight list.
All right. Up next, we have AdMech and Tyranids. Those are playing the games a little bit differently, but again, they have the things to go stand on objectives and have high OC. Whether it's a lot of AdMech bodies or some Norns, you just throw those on some objectives and say, deal with it, sucker. And they will have the potential in the right matchups. Definitely, I think, a little bit harder to get the right AdMech matchups than for the Tyranids, but they're still in the same tier. I just think the Tyranids edge it out for being maybe a little more consistent on being able to get a big spike as far as differentials go.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I actually keep seeing more and more AdMech hitting the table in terms of teams, which tells me that is something that people are identifying, right? That's part of the game that other armies, like these Marine armies, where they have 5 MSU bodies, or Yanari, or whatever the case is, like they don't have enough bodies or OCs. So the way that teams are looking to counter that is armies like AdMech and Tyranids and Sisters, which I just saw a couple teams run at ITT, Asher Militarum, Leagues of Votann, Necrons, even. Like those are all armies that are looking to counter the play of the small MSU types to actually get after those matchups, which are bad for almost everyone else.
Yeah, a lot of bodies. You may die for the cause, but you could also win if they have a unit that's gonna in Yanari move on and try to say charge me. You just don't care because you have 20 OC, so they can put their fights frick out there if they really want to. It just doesn't matter, and you're really taking away that part of the game for an army like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And then 3 more Space Marines rounding out the tier. Who would have thought?
Yeah. We'll do Blood Angels and Space Wolves first. Blood Angels are still very, very good, right? In WTC layouts with terrain, they have all those things that make them effective. They love infantry. They have good units and sanguinary guards and assault intercessors and all those things that they have access to. They just get better in Liberator Assault Group or whatever it is that you're running. So Blood Angels as a whole, as Space Marines, is good. And no surprises really there. I don't think we need to tell anybody that. Space Wolves, Stormlance, if you're running Advance and Charge and that's what you want to do and you have Space Wolves, like this is the way to run it. And once again, WTC is great because you can hide, you can do things. They do have access to a Vectora, which all the other unique chapters I don't think have it. They're the only ones that do, besides generic Space Marines, Ultramarines that have access to Uriel, or if you take a Calidus, but they have it built into a Dreadnought. So I like them a lot. And I think they're just going to get more and more popular. Black Templars, people may be asking the question, why are they up there? They don't seem nearly as good. They're Space Marine bodies. Still have access to Oath. That still have access to good tools and units. They will not be the best, but they are going to do what we've been talking about this whole time, as long as played properly. They will go out there. They will auto-see you on objectives. They will trade exceptionally well, and they will do that for a game. They will be able to, as an attacker, go into certain matchups and be successful because they are Space Marine bodies.
Yeah, good old Space Marines. There's only one left, and it falls into the build dependent, and that is the Dark Angels. Let's go ahead and talk about it before we go to the rest of them. Why is Dark Angels falling down here as just a little bit rougher? I mean, it was it's a decent defender. It can take on quite a few things, but it's just not seeing quite the big differentials.
So when we say build dependent, what we're referring to is if I were to run Terminator spam, like Deathwing Knights and a whole bunch of stuff, that will not be a good, we don't believe, hacker list because you don't have the mobility to do the things that you need to do in terms of primary denial and scoring. A hypermobile army will just beat you. Now, on the flip side, if you were to run Ravenwing or something like that, there are options in terms of going after primaries in a little bit better ways, or you can run like Stormlance and Dark Angels to give your Deathwing Knights a little bit more mobility with Advance and Charge. Like those are options as well, but that's why we say build dependent, right? Like this can't be an all-comers list if you're planning on being an attacker to push differential. If you're planning on being an attacker that can blunt, maybe there's options there for big bricks of specialty units. But it is all depending on what you take. And that's why they've kind of fallen off just ever so slightly. Once again, it doesn't make them bad, but you do have to tweak them to get in the right lane of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And again, right, this is how many matchups do you have as we narrow it down that you could actually push a high differential. Just because you were saying they're not one of the best ones to use an attacker, if you see one of those matchups, 100% use these as attackers. Like, don't just look at this and go, okay, well, they're down here, we probably should just try to defend with them or not take them. No, you just need to be very aware of what you can put them into and be ready to have kind of, as you're going through your pairings, what's going to be, kind of filling some roles in general.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Going back to the start of the tier, though, we got Adeptus Sororitas, some sisters. They've been doing a lot better lately in singles play and definitely still have some bad matchups, but they also have a couple good matchups still. And if you can find them, they'll do okay.
Yeah, I actually think Sisters, Eshmel and Votan are all in that kind of boat of like, as attackers, they just need to find the good matchups, right? If that's something that they're capable of doing, I know as Custodes, like, I don't want to see Votan. It's just too many bodies, too many guns, too much AP. A lot of shooting, even in my shooting phase. So there's problems there with all three armies that they have really good matchups that we can go into. So we talked to Martin Cooper over there with Mind Goblins. And I talked about his Ashmiltarum list, and he, like, as you saw, when we did his reference for his list, he dominated people. Like, dominated people. Now, he is one of the best players in the world right now, so understandably so. He was very good with his list. But you as a player, like, you need to identify what that is for you, right? Based on the rest of your team comp and all those things. Maybe in your team, you are one of the best attackers because of the list you did and the choices you made, but not everyone is going to do that. So build dependent is definitely super important for all three of those. Lane, what are your thoughts on Ashmiltarum? Where do they stand for you?
I don't know. I think it's one of those things where guard is just generally a great teams list or team faction because for the most part, there's very few reds. They have some good greens and they have a lot of yellows and very few reds. They are able to keep the game close no matter what. The same goes for, probably Leagues of Votan fall in a very similar boat. They have their good matchups. They have their okay matchups. Not a lot of bad matchups. So it's one of those that you can just kind of throw in and they're very flexible. Oh, we need to blunt. We have, go defend, take a light board and just try to maybe get a 12 this time in a little bit better of a matchup. It really just kind of comes down to what your matrix is telling you. And they are extremely flexible in that role.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That completely makes sense. I do like them though. Ashmiltarum, I like the fact that we have it on our team. I think you guys appreciate it as well because as a defender, it's probably, as we talked about before, one of the best out there.
Yeah, I know I have definitely as the captain, there's been actually a fair amount of times where we just keep it as an attacker to where like we have a fair amount of like melee heavy armies within our own composition. And it's honestly been nice to just be like, well, they have Death Guard and we can't put any of these melee armies into Death Guard. So we need to keep shooting armies as potential attackers. So if they use Death Guard as a defender, we have things that can go in there and not just go, all right, well, here's 15 plus points, opponents, like, enjoy. So there are some very niche cases. Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things in general, very good. I think they're probably, if we can use them as a first defender, it's something we like to do, but it's not always a guarantee. It's just very matrix dependent. Get them on a light board, they'll do fine.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, our last two.
Rounding it out, we got the Necron.
You go.
Rounding it out, we got the Necrons and the Tau. Those are our final two factions within this tier list. Necrons, not pushing a ton of high differential. Why is that?
In the testing that we've done so far, the things that have stand out the most and things that we've said about all these other armies is mobility, and ability to push primaries. Necrons as a whole don't do that as well into as many matchups as a lot of these other ones do. Not to say that, like, I've ran into that immortal brick or that warrior brick that's unkillable with like 20 guys, and it's like, oh, I didn't kill the whole unit, so now it resurrects above half again. Those things are scary, and it is definitely frustrating. But once again, they struggle significantly when it comes to actually putting board-wide pressure to create large differentials into a lot of matchups. So that's the main reason.
Yeah. And then finally, Tau. I think this is one of the few that is usually actually very good at differential if you can find the right matchups. But Tau right now are suffering from just not really being super strong in the current meta. Generally, I think they're higher on this tier list, probably even like maybe even up to the A tier and the push it real good. But right now, there's just not a lot out there that they're like, oh yeah, I can crush that list.
Yeah. And the main reason is because they all need a board. Now, if I told like John and Matt, like, hey, I need you to take Tau to teams, but I will guarantee you get to pick the board. Will you play Tau? They're like, yeah, absolutely. You can guarantee the board. Like, I can take a light board every time or a medium heavy, whatever it is that they're looking to take. Then I think they'd be very, very happy with it. But the problem is we can't guarantee boards. We can't guarantee like those options are going to be there. And we can't even guarantee good matchups. So overall, that window is the smallest for Tau. Now I think auxiliary cadre is awesome. I've been told good things about retaliation cadre, but they are at the bottom for a reason because that window is very, very small, and they definitely struggle at certain points.
Yeah. Awesome. Alrighty, let's go ahead and kind of wrap it up with a couple of overarching thoughts here as we kind of look back over this tier list. You know, one of the things I would say personally when you're looking at this is really on your team, when you're going through your matrix, you should be looking at probably 2 armies that you're like, man, if we can get these 2 specifically into one or, you know, a good matchup, then we're going to be looking really pretty. You know, you're not going to be able to get all, you know, 4 attackers into 4 great matchups because that's just not how pairings works. So really trying to understand which of these armies that you are taking have the highest likelihood to, you know, maybe get a big, you know, 17 or 20 and saying, okay, cool, we're going to be holding these, looking for these matchups. And even if it's not during the original attacker defenders and you're falling into those bottom pairings and just saying, well, screw it, we're going to try to take out everything that's not great for them and just see where they land. And hopefully they hit one of their greens in the bottom. Totally a valid way to go.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to look at it, right? Like pairings, it's like the plan will go great up until the point that you get hit in the mouth, right? Like up until the point you see the first defender, and now my plan completely changes. So I really like the idea that you had, Lane, of just being very general with it, right? We can't be so structured in the fact that like, well, we have to do this. Like I have to have this as an attacker. This has to go into this matchup or else we lose. If your team or plan is set like that, you're setting yourself up for failure here. So that plan actually changes between each set of pairings because the 8 armies you're going into are now going to look different than the 8 armies you faced previously. So you should be adapting your game plan in terms of what those 8 armies look like. So I'll give you an example because I think it's important to visualize it. So let's say we'll take Denver 40K Fight Club. We'll use them as an example because I don't think anything is surprising here for what we're taking. So you got Inari, Chaos Knights, Imperial Knights, Death Guard, Ultramarines, Ash Militarum, and Custodes. So those 8 armies, let's say, are going into the 8 armies for, let's see here. We'll take the top 8 armies here. So the top 8 armies, Eldari, Drakari, Thousand Sons, Death Guard, Emperor's Children, World Eaters, Space Marines, and then Orcs. Say that's the top 8. We'll get rid of Drakari just because obviously we're taking Ari, and then we'll add Chaos Demons on there. So now that's the top 8 armies for the opposition. So let's say the first thing they were to do is put out, like looking at that, like the first thing they do is put out Gladius Space Marines, right? They're so good in everything. They're a great defender. Do we as an individual, as a team, do we put out armies that we think can push differentials on Gladius? Or do we put out armies that we think can blunt Gladius? Maybe we go out and we put out the mirror. We put our Ultramarines out there. And then we also put out maybe, like, we put out Custodes as well. Even though Custodes are closer to the bottom of the list, maybe it's a Gladius list that has Marnius, that has a few combat units, that doesn't necessarily, that I can trade with in terms of Custodes. And then now my whole plan has changed because of what they did and who we put out. Even though Custodes is closer to the bottom of that list, that doesn't mean they're not a good attacker. Or we can look to push differential on them. And maybe for us, differential is pushing like Inari. Maybe we're like mobility for mobility. We have a way to turn off Overwatch. We have a way to be really, really cheeky and steal primary and do all those things. And then our other armies, we put out like Astra Militarum or something like that. Even though Astra Militarum is a great defender, we're pretty happy doing that. Or we say, okay, well, Gladius Space Marines, you have no Lancers. So here's Imperial Knights and Chaos Knights. Can you kill both of them? Oh, you can't? Okay. All right. Well, now you're in trouble. So each one of those plans is good. It doesn't make them bad in any way. None of those plans, I think anyone looking at it would be like, no, it's there's only one right answer for this. And I am by no means a pairing master, but I do have a general understanding of how to play 40K. So both of those armies and all of those sets would be adequate for me in terms of finding out what the end solution was. Yeah. It's just something to picture in your head, right? Like every single one of those is different. Every 8 pairings is different. And then you have to evaluate those lists. So you have a lot of work to do in between rounds, prior to rounds, at the end of the day, before the following one. But that's what makes teams fun, because even the pairing process is fun.
Yeah, I mean, the pairing process in general is just like, you're like, we know our first concrete step, and that's it. When you show up to the table, you're like, this is our first defender. After that, you're scrambling. You're going, okay, what's left? What do they have left? What do I have left? Right? What do these matchups look like? Do I need to be trying to maybe pull this army out from them to make everything else look better for us? Like, you have to be in the moment and present. And you can do, like, getting this prep gives you a good idea of like what to maybe be looking for on, like, oh yeah, maybe trying to make sure we're not doubling up and using one of our good attacking armies as a defender. And maybe how you're going about trying to, go through your pairings and take certain boards off the table so that when you get to the bottom half, matchups just look good in general because, the boards look a certain way regardless. That there's multiple layers, and that's what we're really hoping to do with this series is kind of give you that full picture over time, because it's very complex, but trying to break it down into these little bits, I think, is definitely a valuable way to approach teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. So we could talk about this for hours. Teams is, as Lane said, it is deep. It is a lot of information, but there is a benefit to giving you it in as bite-sized pieces as we possibly can.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it. Phil, you got anything else?
No, we really appreciate you guys taking the time. If you have any feedback or thoughts, or maybe even attackers that you think should be higher or lower, put them down in the comments below. Lane and I can definitely be wrong about this, but once again, it's based on your perception and how you play it. So if you are an individual that always 20-0s someone, but you're at the bottom of this list, we'd love to hear what you're running and why, and then how you're getting those wins. And hopefully we get to see you out at Denver 40K Fight Club Teams Tournament. It is a 12-team teams tournament. It's going to be massive. It's at the end of the month. Everyone is very, very excited for it.
Yeah, it is coming up fast, and we are stoked. But in the meantime, do not forget to like and subscribe. We will be having more content coming your way soon. And do not forget, victory isn't given, it's forged, and it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. We'll see y'all next time.